Hello, everyone, and welcome to season two of Queer Talk. And today we have a special guest, Sehej, who will be joining us for Queer Talk. So, Queer Talk is a podcast by Fighting Fear. Fighting Fear is a community for queer people by queer people. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, Fighting Fear Community, and our website, www.fightingfear.co.uk. So, Sehej, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Sehaj Kaur. I am Sikh. I'm an artist and a dancer, a writer, a poet, a singer, and I am trans.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for that. That was a very concise introduction. I love that. Thank you.
thank you. I'm
Uh,
attempting to be concise.
I love that.
Yeah.
So thinking about our conversation today, obviously we have many things that we can talk about, but let's start with the most obvious.
Mm.
How was this journey to become, well, I don't know which came first, your transness, your Sikhism, your artistry, all of it.
Wow. Yeah, well, for me, I feel coming into this world and my earliest memories of being here were kind of like, I like to think of them as like deeply self-aware. I felt very, very clear with who and what I was bringing early on as a child into this world. So I felt sort of very bright. And it was only so when I look back on my past, I see it sort of like the layers of socialization that are put on to us and put on to me. Uh, so like the socialization of being male or being, you have to walk a certain way. I have to dress a
Mm,
certain way. I have to present myself in a certain way.
mm,
So as a child, my parents would cut my hair very short. Um, they would put me into boy clothes and all these things. So, and I feel that was always very strange because my young heroes as a child were Xena Warrior Princess, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I loved the Spice Girls, like, um, these kind of, yeah, these role models were always female role models for me. And so like having this kind of like having this internal feeling of, okay, so I'm drawn to this, but then the external, I have to represent this. It was always a clash for myself because I was like, I know, but I didn't have a word for
mm,
it. I just knew there was something different that was
mm,
not, that I wasn't really fitting in with the rest of the school kids in the same way.
mm,
Um, yes. But I was very fortunate because I do feel, regardless of that, um, my imagination and my ability to have this connection to the invisible was always there. And I think I'm very grateful for that as a, as now as being an adult, and also my relationship to nature was always very dear to me.
mm.
Uh, because I didn't grow up in an urban city landscape. I grew up in a small neighborhood next to a very big nature preserve in
Amazing.
Alabama. So it was very, very nice, yes.
So how does a person from Alabama become Sikh?
So in Alabama, there was a small cafe restaurant boutique shop called the Golden Temple. And in this shop, I met, kind of the hippie crowd, the alternative hippie scene. And it was also run by two Sikh people and also their family. So it was, but they were white Sikhs.
Mm,
So it was very different as far as cultural Sikhi that I now understand, because they were sort of followers of Yogi Bhajan, and um, but I'm very grateful for this because my brother started learning Kundalini yoga as a teenager, and he taught it to me. And then he taught me, I think, the most important thing, which was the Mula Mantra, which the Mula Mantra is the opening of the Guru Granth Sahib. And it is essentially the prayer that for me has been with me since I was a young teenager. And it's very, very beautiful because it starts off with the creator of everything is one, which is Ekonkar. Actually, I have the symbol for it on my wrist. So Ekonkar. And this symbol for me was not something I knew about for a long time until much later, but it captures for me the essence of what I believe to be love, which is that love is one, and oneness is all-inclusive because it cannot be exclusive. Because oneness is not about singularity of saying one that is better than or greater or above. It's not. It's neutral, you know. You can add zeros, you can, play with a one, but it doesn't change the universality of what oneness represents. So for me, this quality, this teaching of really diving into what oneness can be, because coming from a Christian background, we were taught that we have one God, but our God is better than any other God. That we have this God who, if you don't believe in them, they will punish you forever in hell. This kind of quality of a punishing but loving God. And so I didn't really get into that because I don't feel that I couldn't believe that was possible. I couldn't believe that there could be something that creates all and still have hate or still hold animosity or still has fear. For me, that didn't make any sense. So the Mula Mantra, for me, it represents also this quality of God that is loving, that does not have fear, that does not have hatred, and it's also not human. So it cannot be something that we as a human can conceive of,
So you were introduced to Sikhism through this cafe, and then your brother with this mantra, and then what happened?
Well, as life goes,
Clearly, a flame was burnt right through that, like a flame was lit.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
If you come from a place like I did as a child, where there was this, eternal hell, and then an evil and like the devil and all these things, and then you learn about this a completely different world where there is like devotional love, where there is, a quality that you don't have to like. You don't really have to be. You don't have to do anything. That you just simply are, and that's enough. You can come as you are. Which is essentially the same principle as Christianity, but it's just been completely changed from,
repackaged.
Exactly. And I guess for me, because a big reflection that comes within this is like the nature of being in a sense of conversion into another religion, which I don't feel is what it is. I think it's more of an evolution into something else, or a becoming of something else. So, because it's all one, there is nothing like when I look at the Sehej, which is like the martyrdom of Jesus, and I look at all of the Sikhs that died for their beliefs, the Shaheds, and I look and compare, and it's like, this to me, it's very clear that the story that we tell is the fundamental practice of how we live our beliefs, rather than just believe them and just be like, well, we go to church on Sunday and then that's enough. It's like, where's the practice in that? And I feel for me, Sikh, throughout, when I started learning about it more and more, slowly, it wasn't as if like it's kind of like, like the oil lamp, like somehow I still had oil being given to this lamp. So it was always there, you know. And I think for me it was amazing because when I met my first Amritdhari Sikh in Portugal, so this was like 15 years later, that's when I felt like, okay, so it's real. It was actualized into physicality. Because I didn't have any, other than the white Sikh family that I knew in Alabama, I had no other representation.
It was a personification of Sikhism in this man.
Well, yeah, and so the yeah, Babaji, it was amazing meeting him because like it was, and it all happened sort of in a, and also very precarious, you know, not really, there was no like I took this step and I took that, you know, it was the journey. It was like going into, I was not, I didn't have a path. I was wandering without aim in a forest, you know, sort of making my own path, going through the brambles, going through the branches, you know. And throughout that journey also, so my spiritual journey for me was very linked also to my understanding of my, I guess you could say like gender identity or my own sexuality, because always this idea of being queer was wrong or evil or bad or a sin, as you say, you know. And I never could understand that because for me, what I felt in my heart and as, you know, my little girl self, that she always was connected to this source. There was no sense of evil in it, you know. It was only society that was saying I was evil, I was wrong, or as I got older, my body was, you know, sexualized, so people would, you know, kind of make comments and things like this, and I was like, this is not right for me though. Like, I know for me, like being a dancer, working with a body, working with other bodies, like I do find pleasure in my body, and I find pleasure in dancing and in movement, and that has been something that has not been evil, you know. There was this one auntie in the UK when I went there, and she said to me, you know, we don't believe in evil. And that was such a refreshing comment because I was like, ah. And so my journey with Sikhi has also been, it's been so nice because I'm still learning, you know, I'm always learning, and there's not, I don't feel like it's fixed. I feel like there's always something new, you know, because I feel this is the nature of our universe, is to discover, is to kind of continually being and searching.
And you mentioned this Babaji. How did you come across this Babaji, and what was your interaction with him? Because like at the same time, I can imagine it would raise a lot of eyebrows, right? This I can't remember the word you used. Sorry,
Amritdhari.
Sikh person, elderly person, probably an elder in society to some extent. With yourself. How did this relationship blossom? It sounds beautiful. And also, I mean, just on my own personal thing, one of the things I noticed, and I talked about this with you when I first met you, is that whenever I see an elderly Sikh person, specifically elderly Sikh men, I always say Sat Sri Akal. I don't know why, I always do. And the way it's received and the way they respond to is so loving. It's like I've got all of these Sikh granddads all around the world. So whenever I see them, I have to say hello to them.
Yes.
So that's my personal relationship with Sikhism, but specifically elderly Sikh men. I mean, how I can imagine to some extent it's a bit like that, but I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I mean, for me, wow, it's such a journey because I was in the dance research here in Portugal, and that was really bringing me a lot to, well, meeting so many different places because I was working a lot with my dance in public. So I wasn't in a studio, I was out. And Portugal has so many people from all over the world. So I was encountering people from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, and from Punjab. And so when I met Babaji, it was through a group of Punjabi boys who I met. Actually, ironically, by this Our Lady, who was Our Lady of Grace, which was this shrine of the Catholic Holy Mother on top of a hill that actually looks over Martimonish. So like you can see the Grasa up there. And I was doing a dance there. And so anyways, they brought me to meet Babaji because they would have chai and samosa in the square. And I just fell in love with this man. You know, I mean, like, and it was just immediate because it's not rational. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. Like, and I have learned, you know, from my sort of coming into Sikhi, I also learned about Hindu tradition. So I knew about gurus, I knew about teachers. And I didn't necessarily like see him as, you know, someone who, because a guru is a very, like, at least in Sikh tradition, it is an enlightener. It's someone who brings light, and we don't necessarily follow other gurus, you know, that are alive. Like the Guru Granth Sahib is sort of the teacher, and we don't need to, like, you know, give that credit necessarily to. But I think the teacher in itself is the light, right? So when I saw him, I saw light. I saw that he was honest and genuine and someone who, you know, again, was Amritdhari. So I felt like, wow, okay, he's like sincere, and he was the first one I ever met. So when I sat with him and I was drinking tea, I was with these, you know, like young boys, you know, as this like trans white girl, like the only white, you know, like girl in this group of people, and seeing Babaji and just meeting him in sort of all my fragility, all my insecurity, all of my, you know, I was wearing essentially like, you know, my dancing clothes, which were really like worn out and tattered and all these things. And there was just so much love, like just this vibration. They say in Sikhi, it's like the vibration of Nam, you know. So like the Nam is like when we recite the name of God, you know, it creates a vibration, and I felt it, you know, and I couldn't explain it at the time because I had no language for it. So yeah, I mean, it transformed me. And so this was about like 3 years ago. And so, yeah, I mean, because he taught me the Mool Mantra. So I heard it from, you know, from a native Punjabi speaker. This was my first time hearing it. So I would listen to him and I would recite it because I already knew it, but only from sort of a Western, you know, tongue, an English tongue. And so when I heard it again, you know, it like, I used to chant it almost every day from that point, because whenever I would meet him, we would recite it every day, you know? And so it was just like, so slowly I started, you know, the lamp was just still being lit and it was there and just growing, you know, and I felt it.
And how was the community with you?
Well,
you know, being white, being trans.
Yeah. You know, it was confusing because I must admit there was a small love story that happened. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it also shaped my perspective because being inside of this space, having my, you know, obviously the color of my skin, and even just coming from the United States, it put me into a very different sense of, well, I guess, of being, you know, of kind of like this unspoken hierarchy, which is there. I mean, like $1 is like 80 rupees, right? So even having this financial distinction was very clear, you know, which I wasn't fully aware of at the time, you know, because I was just very naive. I was very ignorant, you know, coming from the United States, from this like massive empire, coming to Portugal and having all these experiences and being like there is, you know, like just really meeting humans, meeting people who had, you know, genuine suffering and genuine
understanding your place in that as well, as you talk about social hierarchies, right?
Well, also, you know, I mean, and whiteness, like it was really clear to me because, you know, I mean, like the encounters with police were very different. Like how police would interact with me and with my Punjabi friends, the difference of that.
So how did they treat you because of all of those things? Because obviously they'd be aware of that. They would understand these social,
I think so,
social and societal hierarchies. So how was that interaction? Because at the same time, you know, on one hand, these boys are introducing you to their elder, to their Babaji as well. But they're also aware that societally, you're going to have a very different experience to them for various reasons, good and bad.
Well, I think, you know, for some time, because I wasn't fully expressing this quality of my trans self. So like this passing of being male was also very different, which I also didn't really know what that fully meant at the time, because I also felt I felt like I was in this kind of blindness, you know, because yeah, like again, you know, these people, they were very, you know, they're like, oh, let's go here, let's go, you know, let's go drink whiskey, you know, and which I don't really like whiskey, or but these kinds of things of like, okay, you know, so here's the money, you know, or whatever, and like we would kind of pass on this. And for me, it was very curious because, and maybe, you know, I haven't really thought about it so fully, that how that relationship kind of evolved. But I do feel there was a lot of care, you know, and I can only really speak on it in this moment, in the way that coming out as Sehej Kaur and having my gender marker very clearly stated in the name, because Kaur is given to female. I think this is when it showed,
isn't it?
Well, validating, and also I think it showed me that our relationship that we built over the last 3 years, like the friend group that I was in, they have respected that name, you know. So I think that's really, for me, that's what I can speak on as far as like my experience, because I felt, you know, sort of invited, because I didn't how to say, I didn't know that this would happen to me, you know, in the sense of like, I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to go, you know, meet Babaji, I'm going to meditate on the, you know, with Nitnem, the prayers, and then I'm going to, you know, go be blessed with Amrit in the UK. Like these things that have happened. I don't want to say it's just happened. I mean, we say in Sikhi that it's like, it's the blessing, it's the grace of God. And I honestly feel like, what isn't the grace? Like even the most horrific things, you know, it's not, like when they seem horrible, like there is somehow light in it. Because it hasn't been easy. I mean, like my friends were also kind of bullies, like especially, you know, they had some moments where, well, I don't know how to say, because it was really, but like, you know, because of my femininity, I was also not, you know, necessarily like a white man, right? I was a white feminine person, so I could be treated kind of, you know, not very well.
So I mean,
which was
I guess a Punjabi person myself, but from Pakistan and a Muslim background, there's certain words that are used to describe biological males who are effeminate. You know, khusra being one of them. And even though we have third genders culturally in the subcontinent of India, you know, we have the third gender, and they have been historically part of society and still are in many parts of the subcontinent of India. So that's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal. Yeah, the discrimination is still very much there. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, yeah, I think that's, but it's interesting because I feel like, because we are, you know, a lot of people in Portugal are sort of transplanted, right? We're coming from so many parts. We are coming with those backgrounds, and we're in this sort of other territory that necessarily isn't where we grew up. So it's like we're all meeting in these different places, like, you know, and it's I think for me, this is an interesting meeting, because it wasn't as if, you know, we were friends from a long time, you know, and like I developed this name, or like I was using, like they were calling me Kusra like at a very young age, you know, and then we like grew up into, it was like we're meeting, and then it's like we're then discovering what we want to be to each other, you know, and that was very interesting for me as like an encounter.
So there's like an acceptance, but also still bullying within that. So
yeah, and I think it was almost like, you know, I guess whatever we like bullying, I kind of look at it now as like an initiation process, you know, because it's kind of like, you know, because our minds are very tricky, right? And so when we meet other people who are different from us, anyone who's different from us, I think we don't necessarily know how to actually have communication. We don't know how to actually really be with each other. I have a very beautiful friend who I met. Um, it's a small story. We met on an airplane in the airport. And when we met, I said, because they were like, yes, brother. And I was like, actually, no, I'm a sister. He had a dashtar on, and I had my head covered. And he was like, wow, you're interested in Sikhi? And I was like, yes, I am, because I had this whole relationship with Babaji, I was very much, so I met so many more Sikh people from that introduction, and also saying Sat Shri Akal. So even just knowing this, in my small, yeah, it opens up a lot, because it's like, wow, and even if whenever you speak someone's native tongue, their heart opens, I feel, because it's something really like you're recognizing, this part of someone, and you're also acknowledging that, yeah, it's not just English in the world.
So we've
and
talked about. Sorry, yeah, please finish.
Yeah, just because when I met him, and I was talking with him the other day, and when he had such a genuine curiosity about my life, and we're coming from very different places, right? Like he has no idea about trans lives. So, but like through our meeting, he's asking questions, and I think because of the respect that he's giving, I really feel there's so much love that can be opened, because we're actually wanting to know each other. And that's so rare sometimes, because often, like, when people say, oh, well, you're this, you're that, I don't want to know, because your culture is completely different from what I'm even used to. Instead of being curious, and I think this is kind of a fault of ours sometimes as humans. We forget to be curious.
So on that point, then, I wonder. I mean, you talked about obviously how the Sikh community, but just generally South Asians have been with you, but specifically the Sikh community. How was it for the white community? So, when I say white people, just white people generally, when they see you, how do they respond to you?
So I'm in a dance company that is mostly white Portuguese people. We have people from Brazil also, who are not white. And when I came to them, I remember this one, because there was a festival that happens every summer in July with the dance festival. And I remember the first time where Babaji, he tied my dashtar the first time. So this was like some 2 years ago. And it was the first time that I ever walked the streets with a dashtar. And I remember the feeling of it, because like so many Punjabi people that I knew and also didn't know, but when they would see me, they were really, respectful. When I got to the festival itself, it was kind of like there was no knowing of what that meant, of what a dashtar is, or what that greeting is. So it was kind of like meeting the worlds, because I feel, for me, it's honestly very similar to when I come out as trans to white people who don't understand what trans is. It's like when I talk about Sikhi, they're also very confused. They don't understand, and because some people are like, well, you've joined a cult, or some people are like, you've this or that. Like there's not even a question.
I imagine a lot of people think you joined Hare Krishna.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, for me, the representation of Sikhi has been such, I mean, even in my own education in the United States, I never learned even the word. I didn't even learn about Punjab, and for me, I find it fascinating, because it has shaped so much of history, actually, of history that we might not even have known. And I think it's really disappointing, because I think it's interesting for me as a white person who has been taught, actually the white rendition of Jesus's story, kind of bleaching Jesus, erasing their
Making
heritage.
Jesus white and giving him a six-pack.
Well, right. you know, and it's like, I've even seen representations of Jesus with blonde hair and blue eyes. It's like, what are we dreaming here? And I think it's the same, you know, as far as, for me, like, actually, I think this is a very good point, because my journey with kind of coming into terms in relationships to whiteness, especially whiteness and Sikhi, is that I think when I learned about the relationship of the English colonization and how it's influenced the Sikh history, you know, and also them fighting, you know, being a part of the British military, and then still, even though that happened, they were not even written in some of the history books, at least in the United States. And that to me is a complete disservice to the lives of the people who were there.
I mean, even in the UK, to be fair, I mean, the monument to represent the contributions of the Commonwealth, as it was called, is in the middle of, like, it's in the middle of Green Park, I think, in London. And it's something that you have to get to by crossing a motorway. Like, there's no easy way to get to this monument. So it almost feels quite deliberate that it has been erased or hidden out of view. And actually, a big part of that military support was by Sikh men, specifically. You know, so to take that history and hide it or even distort it, and then with everything that's happening in the UK right now, with the race riots, and it's not our first race riots in the UK. This is, I don't know, third.
It really feels like it's like a resurging of the past.
I'm not even sure it's a resurging. I think this is something that's, you know, part of British culture, really from the top down.
Well, absolutely.
It's so systemic. The fact that they can't call it race riots, they can't call it Islamophobia, that they can't call it all of these things, and there's, you know, the way the British media will use certain language to whitewash what is actually happening. Is part of the narrative of how Sikh history has been distorted by Westerners.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the most outrageous things I heard when I was studying about the relationship between British and Sikh history is that when there was this one, I don't know his name, but he essentially translated the Guru Granth Sahib into English and said one day this is going to be very nice in a museum. And for me, this was such and I think it's even happening in most religions today, where, you know, when I went to I love going to the Catholic churches, especially here in Portugal. They're so beautiful, and I also think they're such a beautiful place to focus, especially in the city, because it's quiet. And, you know, and there was a place that I just went to recently where Saint Anthony was born. And so when I went to see this place, I had this thought, you know, because there everyone was just kind of going in and out as if it was like a museum, or as if it was like a tourist attraction and not a place of worship. And it became clear to me, it's like, you know, when there is a predominance of a culture where like Catholicism is very predominant or Christian is very predominant, it can have the luxury of doing that, you know, of just being kind of like, oh yeah, well, you know, we got our God, we have our, you know, accoutrement, and it's all good. But when it's like a sincere faith, or even, and I think it's really relevant also to even trans people, because we don't have a very strong community as far as like, you know, we don't have cafes, we don't have places that we can go and be safe, and, you know, we're not really congregating in mass, you know, in that way. And I think sometimes that's kind of taken for granted. So whenever I see, you know, this kind of quality of making God sort of like a tourist attraction, I think this is very it's very clear. It's very dangerous, actually,
It's very
as a
capitalist,
practice.
isn't it? And that kind of falls
It
into
is.
colonialism. Colonialism is the ultimate capitalist system. And
Yeah,
coloniality is a colonial, I can never say this word, colonial, it's colonial mindset. It's a
precisely.
colonial mindset which basically you think you can monetize bodies, babies, uh, people's well-being, people's religions, people's culture.
And it's very clear, and it's like when I went to the UK, it became very clear as to what is happening there. And so these, you know, this, as you said, like the systemic racism that's unfolding not only in the UK, all over the world, is very, for me, it's very clear, because if we're not dealing with the origins, if we're not willing to face those things, we'll never resolve it. We'll never go through it. It's the same with any phobia. And my sweetheart sent me a video, and it was very nice, because there was this woman who brought her child to a protest, and this one woman said, "Why are you bringing your child to," and saying like racial slurs in the protest, you know? But it's like, even if the child wasn't there, this child is also being taught racism at home, you know, because that's how it's passed down. Discrimination is not something that we come into the world like having. It's something we're taught.
Completely.
And it's our responsibility, you know, what are we teaching? And for me, this is the practice of Sikhi. It's how do we teach? How do we follow? How do we listen? And this is the whole thing of the Amritdhari, which is a part of the Khalsa. And Khalsa is essentially choosing sovereignty, being sovereign.
So, just to round off, because I'm conscious of the time, if we could find out more about some of your work. So I know you mentioned you're also an activist. Where could we find out about some of that kind of work that you might do? Any
yes.
Sikh LGBT organizations, for example?
Yeah, if you're curious about queersikh, I would go to sarbat.net. And this is where you can find events that are happening. They're mostly in the UK, but they have events online as well. Right now, there's like a summer reading book club.
So that's Sarbat, SARBAT.net. So you can find out a bit more about LGBTQ Sikh people from that. So, Sehaj, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Obviously, we can talk for hours, but obviously time is limited. So this was Sehaj talking about being a trans Sikh person. And this is a podcast by Fighting Fear. Fighting Fear is a community for queer people by queer people. You can find out more about us on our website, www.fightingfear.co.uk. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Fighting Fear Community. Sehaj, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been so wonderful.
Thank you.